Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's training, Navigating Business Structures, Entity Formation, and Transition Strategies. I'm Rebecca Chauncey, Interim Director for the Illinois Small Business Development Center, or SBDC, at Build Bronzeville. Pleased to have you with us. And today's training is funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the United States Small Business Administration, or the USSBA, the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and the Urban Juncture Foundation. You will have the ability to answer or ask rather questions today by typing those in the Q&A section, which you will see if you hover over the bottom of your screen. There's the Q&A button. Please type your questions there, and if relevant in the moment, our presenter will address them at that time. And there's also a time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. And you will, as you heard me say, this is being recorded. So just a heads up that you will also receive the recording of this that you can review later. But you'll hear more about that in a bit or toward the end of today's training. I'm very happy to introduce you to today's presenter. This training is being presented by a fantastic attorney who we have been honored to partner with for a number of years at the Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, Amy Cook. So I am going to pass the mic over to her, if you will, and she will lead us in a great discussion about navigating business structures. Take it away, Amy.
Thanks so much. Great to be here with everyone. I am Amy Cook from Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and the director of the Economic Justice Program, which means that we work with small businesses and nonprofits. We partnered with Urban Juncture Build Bronzeville for many years. We're thrilled to do so again today. And because they are a community partner of ours, if you're working through that organization, you are certainly welcome to come to Chicago Lawyers Committee for pro bono legal services, transactional legal services. We don't do disputes in our area. I'll talk more about that at the end of how you can apply for services if you do need some pro bono legal services or assistance with your business entity selection, getting that all set up, or perhaps a transition, those kind of things that we're talking about today. So we are going to talk about business formations. These are the ones that we're going to go over: sole proprietor, a partnership, LLC, corporation. And because we get questions about this, we'll also just kind of briefly touch on what an L3C is, and a nonprofit, how those are different. Sometimes we do get people come to us saying they're not sure if they want to start a for-profit business or nonprofit, and just kind of what that would look like. So I will discuss that a little bit too. So some of you might already just consider yourselves a sole proprietor. It's simple and inexpensive to create. From a tax perspective, you're a single entity. That means like your business income and losses are reported on your own federal tax return. However, this is not really any sort of legal structure, so it doesn't offer any protection to you for personal liability. So all your personal liability, you are personally liable for all business debts. If there was ever a court judgment, a creditor could go after your home, car, personal bank account, etc. So just try to think through, what kind of business you're in or would like to get involved in. Does it carry a lot of risk, or is it very low risk? Sole proprietor is fine for some people, maybe just starting out in a very low risk kind of business. As an attorney, I like to see you have some sort of business structure though. But if you are just a sole proprietor right now and a very low risk type business, that's probably fine for now. And then you might want to consider a legal structure down the road. A partnership is if there are two or more of you, you must choose partnership, corporation, or LLC. We do recommend that you do have a written partnership agreement. It can be very simple. You don't necessarily have to have a lawyer do this at all. You could pull examples from the internet. So it really is just kind of an agreement, as to kind of who's going to be doing what. But I say to, draft this up yourselves because otherwise the Uniform Partnership Act applies, and that may not necessarily be how you want to run your business. The downside with this one is that again, this is not a legal structure, that you have to file anything with Secretary of State or anything. So your personal liability is similar to sole proprietor. And then also just to keep in mind, sometimes folks aren't aware of this, but that each partner can legally bind the partnership and each is liable for the actions of the other. So if you are in a partnership, with your business partner, that person can go off and sign a contract for something and it is legally binding on the partnership and you may not have agreed to that. So just be aware of that. So that's why having an agreement is great. I'll come back to that other slide in a moment, but here are some of the things that we recommend that you include in the partnership agreement. How long it will last, is it going to be for a certain period of time? You might go into business with someone just for a certain period of time, to do something for, maybe you are a food vendor and you're going to just work through festival seasons, or is it going to be indefinite? Indefinite is perfectly fine too. You'd put in the purpose, who's doing what in terms of contributions. Are you both putting in equal amounts of money, or is one person the money person and one person's the more management kind of person, those kind of things. How are you going to divide up the profits and losses? Are people taking salaries? How would you take on a new partner? How are you going to resolve disputes? And then if a partner leaves, does the partnership automatically dissolve? It would obviously if there was only two of you and one person left, but if there was multiple partners and one leaves, how does that work? Does the partnership dissolve or continue? Do you buy out that partner? Those kind of things. So how partnerships are managed, that can be managed in two ways. There can be a general partner, which is usually the manager, and they have unlimited liability. Or there's a limited partner, so that limits the person's liability, and they also have a limited management role. So moving on to a limited liability company, that's the LLC that you often see. And this is kind of my favorite kind of business structure, so kind of refer to this one quite often. So this one is pretty easy to form, and this is a legal business structure, so this does limit your personal liability. It can be formed by a single individual. That's called just a single member LLC then, and that's perfectly fine. Most people do that. I've done that with a business as well. For the management style for this, it can be member managed or management managed. And those are both kind of a mouthful. Most of them would be a member managed. So the people within an LLC are called members, as opposed to like in a partnership, they're called partners. And they are called members in a LLC. So most of the time, just one of the members would be kind of the manager of it, or you might hire a management company to be the manager of it in some cases. If you are forming an LLC with some other people, just like with partnership, we do recommend that you have a written operating agreement. It's going to contain most of the things that I enumerated for the partnerships, but we'll still go over that again in a moment. And then an LLC also offers greater flexibility on sharing profits and losses than a corporation does. So we'll definitely go over like kind of what the pros and cons of each of these are, but that's definitely one of the pros of an LLC. Now, I would like to just point out that I am not a tax attorney, so just wanted to say that, before going into kind of the tax treatment of this, that, I know just enough to kind of advise people on on the business structure. But if you're really getting into whether an LLC or a corporation might be right for your type of business, I definitely do recommend that you talk with your CPA or possibly a tax attorney to figure out what would be best for you. But a great benefit of the LLC, though, is that it's pass-through taxation. So again, just like with the sole proprietor, the LLC owner reports the income, losses, credits, deductions on their individual tax returns. So the LLC does not itself pay taxes. So this is unlike a corporation where corporations get that double taxation. The corporation is taxed and then you're taxed, on your income as well. So under federal and state laws, the LLC is just what's considered a disregarded entity. So the taxation does just flow through to your own tax return statement. So that's a big benefit, makes it a lot more simple. But do keep in mind that you can elect to be taxed as a corporation if you want to keep money in the business, or if the owner's tax rates are higher than the federal corporation tax rate, you can elect to be taxed as a corporation. There's a number of reasons why you might want to consider that, but again, that would be something to talk with a CPA about. So starting an LLC, as I had mentioned, really is not too bad at all. You don't necessarily have to have an attorney assist you with this, although, if you're just a little tentative about these kind of forms, which a lot of us are, you are certainly welcome to come to us for assistance with starting an LLC. But as I say, it really is pretty easy, though. You can file online in most cases. There are a few cases where you can't, but most cases you can file online, and you just go to the Illinois Secretary of State office. You file form LLC 5.5, and it's $150. So prior to filling out that form, check name availability. So it can't be confusingly similar to another existing Illinois business. You do need to use LLC in the name. And then, if you're just kind of toying around right now with a name and you're not quite ready to launch your business, you can reserve the business name for a fee. You do need a principal place of business. It does not need to be in Illinois, but you cannot use a P.O. box. It does need to be a physical address. As you may know, some business services like UPS, FedEx type places can offer you a business address that will work for these kind of circumstances. If you really don't want to use, many of us run businesses out of our homes, maybe you don't want to use that then. So if you don't want to use, your home address, you might want to look into like those types of places like a UPS, and they'll give you a business address. You'll put in the effective date of the articles of organization. You do need a registered agent and a registered office in Illinois. That person must be actually physically in Illinois or authorized to do business in Illinois. So usually that will just be you, the registered agent. It could be, your business partner. What would I just say is that's the person who's going to receive the emails, the physical mail of just, for your annual registrations, that kind of thing. So somebody who's just kind of, responsible, checks their mail, that person should be the registered agent. The purpose for an LLC, you can list your specific purpose if you like, or you can always just put any lawful purpose. That's fine too, because maybe you're going to branch out into different areas in the business. The term of existence is usually perpetual, but again, you can change that if you like. And then you will need to put the names and addresses of the initial managers or members having the authority of a manager. So you can file online under these circumstances if you're not formed in another state and if you're not using a specific purpose clause. There are a couple of types of businesses that do have to use specific purpose clauses. I think it's like banks and maybe some medical type type businesses. That does not, not most of us. But there are just a couple of ones where you do have to have a specific purpose clause. So again, this is not most of us though. So most of us really can file online. And for that, you'll just need the name of the LLC, the registered agent in office, the names of the members and managers, the fee, and then you'll receive a confirmation by email in about 10 days. It really is pretty quick, which is very nice too. So I mentioned you should have an operating agreement. And even if you're a single member LLC, I know that sounds a little weird, to have an agreement like with yourself, but it actually does go a long way, if you ever do get into any sort of legal trouble, to show that like you are operating the LLC as a separate entity and you're not like intermingling, your personal life and your business. It really is nice to have them separated. So super easy to do. Again, this is the kind of thing you can find just kind of a template online and then just kind of draft it so it's operating your business how you want it operated. So it is not required to have an operating agreement. You're not going to need to file this anywhere, with any government agency or anything. But if you don't have one, again, just the state's LLC Act will apply. And that, again, just may not be how you want to run your business. So similar with the partnership agreement, the similar kind of things to be included, what your purpose is, the membership provisions, how is it going to be managed, how are you going to fund it, how are things voted on, does it have to be unanimous if you do have other members within your LLC, or does it just need to be a majority? How will people be compensated? How will you add new members? Include the tax and financial provisions, include who's contributing what from the members. Again, what if a member withdraws from the organization? Does the other members buy that person out? Which is what I've usually seen, but I've often seen where it can be over a period of time. So, say I'm leaving the LLC, I want my investment back. The business might not be able to just pay me back, 100% on that day. So you might just say like, over a 1 year time or a 2 year period of time, we'll buy out any members that are leaving the organization. And then what are the methods that the LLC will dissolve? I think this is important too, because you will want to dissolve the LLC, officially, like with the state, if and when the time comes to, close down that business. A lot of people just kind of let it lapse. And that's fine too, in terms of you just stop filing the annual report. But just keep in mind that, the day may come where maybe you do want to start up that business again for some reason. So if you've dissolved it properly, it's a lot easier to reinstate it than if you just kind of let it lapse. Then you have to like pay all the back fees, etc. We'll get into that a little bit more later. People do ask about, should I start a series LLC? So I just wanted to touch on this too. So this is where one LLC runs separate businesses or properties. What's nice about this is that it keeps assets and liabilities and management separate. Excuse me. It is a little bit more expensive to form this. It's $400 in Illinois. But for instance, if you have, let's say, 5 different rental properties, you might want to create one LLC to be like kind of the umbrella organization, and then each of the buildings is a separate LLC. And then what's nice about that is if something does happen with one building, the liabilities for that one is just going to stay within that LLC, and it's not going to be able to touch the assets of the other ones. So if you do have like these multiple businesses and you really want them to stay discrete from each other, you might want to consider Series LLC. It's just a little bit more burdensome. As I say, it's a little bit more expensive to start, a little more burdensome to like kind of keep track of all of them, but there are definitely times where it might be beneficial for you. So some ongoing LLC requirements, over the years, do keep written records of your business decisions. Do keep a separate bank account from your personal bank account. I'll probably say that multiple times during this because it is so important. And sometimes people just forget to do that. If you're intermingling your funds, that really will show that like you're not treating the LLC as a business. So make sure you do have that separate business bank account. And then you will need to do an annual report to the Secretary of State each year. That's very minimal. If you've been doing the same thing year after year, it's very simple. If you are doing any sort of changes, like, you need to change your registered agent, you would note that on the form, and that actually is a separate form also then. But if you change your address, like those kind of things, you might need to update, but it's usually pretty easy to do that annual report. So you can file it with the Secretary of State online or by mail. They will send you a reminder. They're very good about that. So, kind of no excuses to forget to file this. As I mentioned, change of managers, change of your principal place of business. The filing fee is $75 a year. So just kind of keep that in mind. Each year it's $75. If it's 60 days or more late, there is a $100 late fee on top of that. So just kind of keep that in mind. You don't want to have to pay that. If you do need to dissolve the business, I kind of went over this a little bit, but do be sure that you file articles of dissolution with the Secretary of State. You need to be in good standing first and then dissolve the organization. You would then dispose of the company's property, being sure that you've paid off the debts, obligations, other liabilities. And then if there are remaining assets, you can distribute that to yourself, the other members of the LLC. So if you do decide you want to reinstate the business, and we do see this, often from our clients, so you would make sure that you file the application for reinstatement following administrative revocation or dissolution. So they've got a particular form for that, because of course they do. It's the government form 35.40. If you had not been, if you had just let it kind of involuntarily dissolve, you would need to file the past delinquent reports and pay the fees and penalties. So that's something to think about. As I said, if you want to dissolve the organization, just make sure you do it so that, if you do want to reinstate it, you don't have to pay those fees and penalties. So just a few precautions with LLC. Generally, as I said, I really like LLC for most types of businesses. They're more informal than a corporation, easier to run, but just some general overviews, just to be sure you're acting fairly and legally. Don't conceal or misrepresent finances. Make sure you're adequately funding your LLC. You don't need a lot of money to start an LLC, but just enough to meet foreseeable expenses and liabilities. And then, as I said, I'm going to keep saying this, make sure you keep your LLC and personal businesses separate. So people often come to us and say they're not sure if they want to start an LLC, or they've been told perhaps by someone that they might want to start an S corporation. So if you're choosing between the LLC and an S corp, just kind of keep in mind that LLCs have largely replaced an S corp. So, they're kind of, S corp is kind of falling out of favor. I don't really see any reason to start an S corp. If an S corp or LLC are what you're thinking through. Under the S corp, you have to file the same but more burdensome paperwork to form as forming a corporation. You still have to file corporate formalities such as issuing stock, electing officers, holding board meetings, keeping corporate minutes. So the benefits kind of in the old days of an S corp was that it had that pass-through taxation. So you didn't have that double taxation like with a corporation. But now that we have LLCs and they've been around for a while, that kind of replaced an S corp. So it has all the benefits, of just being simpler, cheaper to start, easier to manage, but it also has that pass-through taxation. So as I say, like, I'm not really sure what the benefit of an S corp is. Do think through self-employment taxes such as Social Security and Medicare when you're forming your business. And again, just I'm going to point out, just kind of talk through your tax advisor about what's best. So corporations, now we're talking like a C Corp now. So even though I said I really like LLCs and I do feel like they're right for most people starting a business or other small businesses, but corporations may be right for you also. So again, a corporation is a separate legal entity from the individuals who own it, like an LLC. So, it is a legal business structure. It can be formed by a single person. You own all the stock and you're the only employee. It does limit personal liability, like an LLC. And both with LLC and corporations, I want you to note that it limits personal liability. There are still some circumstances where you can be personally liable. I'll talk about that in a moment. But they're pretty egregious things, so you'd have to like really, be doing something that's pretty egregious. And it offers protection against activities of co-owners and employees. So there are definitely benefits to a corporation. To start a corporation in Illinois, you would file articles of incorporation with the Secretary of State office. And again, most of this can be done online. It needs one of those words or abbreviations in the corporate name, so corporation, corp, incorporated, etc. You do need that registered agent and office in Illinois. It does need, you can just state kind of, again, that any lawful purpose type language, but not for insurance or banking. Those are those areas where you need a specific purpose clause. You would adopt bylaws, those are kind of your organizing documents, just like with the LLC member agreement, your operating agreement, and your partnership agreement. You would issue authorizing shares and you do those initial shares. It could just be like, again, that one class of stock and you're issuing it to yourself, but you do need to authorize and issue shares for a corporation. And you must hold a shareholder/directors meeting at least once a year. That's Illinois law. So, I mean, again, if it's just you, I know it's, again, kind of weird, to have a meeting just with yourself, but you literally do need to do that. Just kind of officially have a meeting to keep the minutes of, what was decisions that were made during, that period of time. And again, it might just be with yourself, but you do need to do that. So you can file online to form a corporation in Illinois if you have only one class of stock. That would just be common stock. You can have the following purpose: the transaction of any or all lawful purposes for which corporations may be incorporated under the Illinois Business Corporation Act. That's like just literally the words you would put in there. And if you're not a professional, medical, or business corporation with a specific purpose. So that would probably cover most people. You do need to do an annual report. It is $75, and that's the form you use. It must be filed by an officer. It must list all officers and all shares of stock that you have issued. So that's what makes it a little bit more burdensome, than an LLC report is just this stock issue here. If you do need to change your registered agent, you have to use a different form, again, because it's the government and different forms, different fees, etc. The Secretary of State will send notices of delinquency 30 days after a report is due. After another 90 days, a corporation will be administratively dissolved if you did not file your annual report. So a good thing with corporations is it allows for the company to grow, really to become quite large if that's what you're looking for. It has a perpetual life, and it makes changes of ownership easy. So this is, something that you could sell. Cons are that it requires more paperwork. It costs more to start than some other forms of businesses and can be affected by that double taxation. So just kind of looking at a C Corp versus an S Corp. A C Corp is a separate tax-paying entity and must pay corporate federal income tax. And an S Corp eliminates that double taxation of traditional corporations, like with an LLC. So with a corporation, if you do need to dissolve it and then possibly reinstate it at some other point, you would file corporate dissolution form with the Illinois Secretary of State. Your articles of incorporation and your bylaws probably will outline how to dissolve the corporation, so just make sure you're following that. It must be authorized by the officers or shareholders to dissolve a corporation. And then if you change your mind, you can file articles of revocation of dissolution. And then perhaps down the road, if you want to start up that corporation again, you can file an application for reinstatement of domestic or foreign corporation with the Illinois Secretary of State. But if you were delinquent, again, if you didn't properly dissolve it with the Secretary of State, if you just kind of let it lapse and the government auto revoked it, then you would need to file those past forms and fees in order to reinstate the corporation. So my little chart here, so if you look on the left side and you're trying to decide what type of business entity to start, if it's just you having the business, can it have one owner? Yes, for all of them except a partnership, which has to have two or more. If you're looking for that easier taxation, the pass-through taxation, all of them are yes, except that corporation, which is taxed separately. And of course, we want to look through what is going to limit your liability, and that would be LLCs and corporations. So just be really clear on that if you are a sole proprietor or a partnership, you do not have that separate business structure, and so you're maybe personally liable. So in what kind of circumstances, could personal liability still be attached? Sometimes you might still have to give a personal guarantee on a loan. Sometimes you may have seen that. IRS may go after personal assets if they really are sticklers about like payroll taxes and doing that correctly. So if you have not done it correctly, they may go after your personal assets. If you've had, highly negligent or intentional acts, drunk driving or something like that, and like even if it's, the company car, quote unquote, you can't just say like, oh, this is a business issue. If you do something, very negligent, then that you could be personally liable for that. If there's a breach of fiduciary duty, if there's fraud involved, that does not protect you by having the business structure. And then just blurring the boundaries between the business entity and the owners. So again, just intermingling your funds, not having like an operating agreement type thing where, you just want to really be clear, I'm operating this as a business and this is my personal life and they're separate. So I'm going to touch on low profit LLCs. Like, as I said, we do get questions about this. They're called L3Cs. So sometimes people who do have something that's like a very socially driven mission, as their business, and they've kind of done some research and are thinking about, should I do an L3C or a nonprofit or a for-profit? Those kind of questions we'll address here. So unlike an LLC and other forms of for-profit businesses where the point is to make a profit, an L3C must have a socially driven mission as its primary objective. And you can think, well, kind of what's the point between a low-profit LLC and just a regular LLC? But this way it allows the funders to spend time and money to do good without having to make a profit for any kind of stakeholder. It can be helpful in, your reputation or marketing, to get like perhaps clients, customers, investors, they may really like that then that you are a socially driven mission. So a big downfall though of an L3C is that just how you're going to fund it. So if you are selling goods and services, and it's a for-profit business, this is a for-profit business, that's fine. But if you're thinking that you might want to get grants and donations from people, Like foundations and people who are giving donations usually want to see that 501c3 status. Because donations would not be tax deductible then to the donor. Foundations probably won't fund you at all, make any sort of grant to you. They do want to see that 501c status. So it really is going to kind of come down to like, how do you think you want to get your money to run this business? I won't read all of this, but this is what you would need to include if you are going to start an L3C. There's a particular form in Illinois for L3Cs. You just need to include that specific language that you see there on the screen, and it'll tell you that too on the form that you have to include that, that it intends to qualify as a low profit limited liability company. No significant purpose of the company is the production of income or the appreciation of property. So not every state recognizes L3Cs. That's kind of another downfall, I would say, of L3Cs is, if you're moving to a different state, if you want to be operating in another state, not every state does recognize this form of business. So just to kind of touch on nonprofits and for-profits, how they work together. We do get questions about this is, if somebody's coming from that nonprofit background, they want to start a for-profit, maybe to provide job training skills for people, et cetera. Or, the other way around, if you have a for-profit and you're like, gosh, I'd really like to like help out my community more. I want to start like a very similar kind of nonprofit, where people don't have to pay for the goods or services and to help the community. But it can impact the nonprofit status. That's the one we really need to pay attention to for the most part here. So for-profits obviously can give money to nonprofits, but you can't be the only funder of the nonprofit. If you are, that's more called a private foundation then. So if you have a nonprofit where there's one funder, so think of like, the Ford Foundation or, any of the large family foundations, they're the only funder of like the good works that they do. So that's a private foundation. That's not what we call a public charity then. Nonprofits obviously can buy goods and services from for-profits, but cannot be established just to enrich a private business or person. So the nonprofit can't only buy from like one, one business. That's also a no-no. So to have that public charity status, you must have 1/3 of your support from gifts, grants, and contributions from public foundations and government. So that's the kind of the thing of like how those can work together. One can't be solely working just with the other one. And it's the nonprofit that really, you might lose that 501c3 status. If you're not getting 1/3 of your support from just, kind of the general public, grants, foundations, et cetera. So I'm just going to wrap up here with some other considerations to think through when you're thinking what kind of business entity to start or switch to. So for partnerships and sole proprietors, again, since those are not legal structures and you're not filing paperwork to start those, if you operate under an assumed name, so that just means anything other than your actual name, you will file an assumed name certificate with your county clerk. So that's where that you might have heard of like DBA, doing business as. That way we as, the community know who's running what, so we just know. Like the reason we don't have to do that with an LLC, a corporation, is because we are filing forms with the Illinois Secretary of State. Also check to see what sort of business license you may require. If you are in Chicago, at the City of Chicago Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, or check with your own town or city or your county to see if you might need a business license to operate whatever type of business it is. Do be sure you get that FEIN. Sometimes it's just called an EIN. It's called a Federal Employment Identification Number. You get that from the IRS. You can do it online. It's super easy. You get your number right away after you fill out the form. The number pops right up. They'll also can mail you a hard copy as well, but you can get that right away. You'll use that to start your business bank account. and look into business liability insurance as well, depending on what type of business you're running. If you are selling retail or wholesale, you'll contact the sales department under the Illinois Department of Revenue. If you will need to contact the Illinois Department of Labor for unemployment compensation matters. For workers' comp, you'll contact the Illinois Industrial Commission. And then you also might want to consider trademarking your business name or logo, that kind of thing. There can be state trademarks, there can be federal trademarks. Come talk to us if you do want assistance with that as well. We do work with trademarks. So I do want to just make the point here that don't worry too much about your business structure because you can change. So your business structure, as long as it's suiting your current needs, that's great. Excuse me. But do keep in mind that, sole proprietors can become LLCs, LLCs can become corporations. So it's not set in stone. So don't worry too much about it. So a sole proprietor, if that wants to become an LLC, you would prepare your articles of organization and an operating agreement. Assuming you already had a bank account for that sole proprietor business, you can transfer it over. Go talk to your bank about that. If you had a loan as a sole proprietor, talk to your lender and see if it can transfer over. But do get a new EIN for the LLC. If you have a partnership and you want to become an LLC, prepare those articles of organization and an operating agreement. Dissolve the partnership and be sure the taxes of the partnership are paid. If you are an LLC and you've decided that becoming a corporation is more right for you, you would file a statement of conversion with the Illinois Secretary of State. So all LLC members must approve. You must submit a plan of conversion. Do go through contracts that the LLC might have had, if you have loans, if you have a lease, notify the people you have contracts with that you're changing your business entity type. Notify your bank, get a new EIN for the corporation. The only one that's really complicated here is if you're a corporation and you'd like to kind of change to something else. The IRS will treat a corporation to an LLC as a sale of the business. So you most likely really will just need to dissolve the corporation and then start an LLC. As I said, that one is pretty complex, so you definitely will want to consult tax professional if that is something that you'd be interested in doing. So I'm going to just open it to any questions we have now. I'm also just going to let you know, so you see here places with the SBDC where you can get additional assistance for your business structure, and then the types of things that you can come to Chicago Lawyers Committee for. We do ask that you are referred by one of our community partners where you've been in some sort of business training, classes, cohort, type thing. We like to see, we do require if you have a business plan, if you've been in business for 2 years or less. And I'm sure the folks at Build Bronzeville can help people with business plans, point you in the right direction for that. As I mentioned at the beginning, we do handle only transactional legal services. So that would be something like helping to start an entity, dissolving, reinstating entities, doing contracts for you. If you've been presented with a contract from another business partner or vendor, to review that for you, or if you need to draft a contract to give to a business partner, we can draft that for you. We do work with IP as well, so we can do trademarks, copyright registrations, walk you through trade secret, what might be like confidential material that you have and how to protect that, draft non-disclosure agreements, those kind of things, an independent contractor agreement we do quite often. Do be sure that you have, agreements in place for your business. They don't have to be all fancy lawyerly kind of things. But just do be sure that you've got those in place. And if you need those, come see us. You've got my email there, and that's our website. We have an inquiry form on our website that we would ask you to fill out first. It's a pretty easy form. Then we can figure out like what services you may need. We also work with employee consultations. So if your business is at that level, we can do consultations and then more direct placement again with an attorney for, if you just want like an employee manual reviewed or drafted, that kind of thing. So I think I've covered everything that we handle, the types of matters that we handle. And then we do a lot of educational programming like this through Build Bronzeville and other of our community partners. So always happy to be providing educational webinars as well. So,
Thanks so much, Amy. If you would keep this slide up, that would be great.
sure. Yeah.
I don't see any questions yet in the Q&A section. I have a sense that that the participants may be digesting everything that was shared, which that's understandable. But before we close for the day, please raise your hand if you're not able to type your question in the Q&A section, and I can give you permission to say your question aloud. We want to, okay, here we go. You'll have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi. I had a question about, so I will have to be referred to you guys in order to work with you guys for the Chicago Lawyer Committee.
Yeah, yeah. So, if you've been working with Build Bronzeville or another similar organization, like if you've taken some business training courses through some organization like that, that's who we'd like to see. Like when on the form, it'll just say like, who referred you, like who's your business coach. So as long as you can answer those questions, then um, that's what we're looking for in terms of the referral from a community partner.
Okay, so if I needed uh help with like not the LLC trademark, I still have to be referred.
Yeah, yeah, we do ask that the business owners come through one of our partners organizations. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
Anyone else before we close for today's training? Okay, well, thank you all for your time and attention. Many thanks to Amy again for a fantastic presentation. I had questions, but she addressed them. That's how thorough Amy is. And
Great, great.
yes, your insight is priceless. Just a reminder that you all will receive a recording of today's session. So that will come with the request to complete a survey about the training. On that survey, there's also space to share recommendations for future training. We love to provide training that will help you to thrive in your business, so your suggestions are welcome. And we hope that this has been very helpful to you. Continued success in your business. And if you're not already a client, as Amy mentioned, you can sign up to become a client with the Illinois SBDC at Build Bronzeville. And as she mentioned, if you have questions about or need legal transactional insight, you can feel free to email Amy, or ultimately you'll need to sign up via the form on the Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights website. Thanks again, everyone, for your time and attention. Continue to have a great day and take care.
All right, thanks all. Yeah, have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh, we do have one more question, Amy.
Yep. Uh-huh.
Okay. This person asks or notes, I live in Bronzeville and I desire to build my business here in the neighborhood. What are the direct sources? Oh, I guess that thanks for your question. So, that would be, I would say, a question for me to address. As a part of the Illinois SBDC at Bill Bronzeville, generally speaking, we work with clients who are starting or growing their business. So we talk to you about, and Amy mentioned this, your business plan. Even before the plan, we talk to clients about whether or not it makes sense for you to move forward with your business. We have a tool that is called the business feasibility checklist that we work with you on. We also work with clients on financial and foundational financial matters. If needed, we refer you to professional service providers like Amy and her team at Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, as well as accountants. I'm trying to think, we work with clients on marketing matters and how they can address potential ways to increase revenue for the company. And I think that covers what we generally address. Let me also add that you have to have a business that is a for-profit, non-cannabis based business due to our reporting requirements. So if you're seeking assistance for a nonprofit or you have a cannabis based business, we won't be able to assist you. I hope that addresses your question. Thanks again for it. And now we are officially all set to end the training. Thanks, everyone. Take care, Amy. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. You too.